Welcome to Planet Marzipan Podcast,
your Fish and Marillion podcast,
where we talk about all things in the planet of Marillion and Fish. I'm Mezza, and here's my mate,
Craig Houston.
Hello, and welcome to the latest Planet Marzipan podcast. In fact, it's our first Planet Marzipan Book Club podcast.
Ooh.
I'm here with my mate Craig.
Yay, hello.
And we are pleased to welcome our special guest, Edwin Ammerlaan.
Hello, guys. Thanks for having me.
Hi, Edwin. Well, we're here to talk about your new book, which I think came out in November, The Marillion and Fish Files, 30 Interviews, Uncut and Uncensored.
Yeah, it's finally out. I've been working on that for 2 years, but looking back, it's been a compilation of 35 years doing 30 interviews. So, pretty proud of it.
It's a fantastic book. I'll say that from the off.
Thank you.
We normally on our podcast do a Wikipedia entry about the album that we're going to talk about, but I think Craig's actually going to read the biog from the back of your book.
Yeah, just to give the listeners a bit of a heads up on who you are. Your biog says that you started as a journalist in 1986. Was it OOR magazine or OOR magazine?
Or, which is the Dutch word for ear.
Ah, right. So you've interviewed over 300 musicians and bands, and your articles have appeared in various Dutch music publications. And you're author of Saga the Biography. And the one that I'm really fascinated by is your fictional journey through 50 years of Pink Floyd, your Lost Souls book, which is really intriguing.
Yeah, which is 2 years old now, and it's a mixture between facts and fiction. I was in the lucky position to interview all band members of Pink Floyd as well, and several times. So I incorporated those interviews and other interviews I researched upon in a book, but together with a fictional character. So I wanted to combine a fictional story with actual events and actual facts over the last 50 years. So it's a good read, but it's not a biography.
Yeah, I'll put it this way, it's next on my list to read.
I'll send a copy over, no problem.
I think that's going to be great.
Because sounds intriguing, yeah.
Because as well as being Marillion fans, me and John are both big Pink Floyd fans as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Edwin, we ask all our guests, how and where did you first hear about the band? How did you hear about Marillion?
Wow. Now I'm starting to feel very old because I have to go back to the early 80s. I was sort of discovering my way into progressive rock with Electric Light Orchestra, Rush, Saga, and then suddenly in 82 I discovered Marillion. I'm not sure how that happened. I believe it was a radio station, a Dutch local radio station at the time. We had this progressive rock program every week, and I was really addicted to that program. So I think I heard about Marillion for the first time in 82. And then what attracted me to Marillion's music was the fresh and raw energy of the band at the time, and the aggression. You could suddenly jump up and down listening to progressive rock and sing along instead of sitting in your comfortable chair with the headphones on. It was a completely different experience, and that I found very intriguing and got me hooked to the band.
Fantastic. When did you first see them live?
I believe that was in 84 in Utrecht, in the same place they played recently, Vredenburg. And that was an amazing experience as well, because I saw myself jumping up and down and singing along and cheering in a matter I haven't experienced before at any progressive rock show before. So that was something really special.
Yeah.
Thanks to the showmanship of Fish, of course.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And did you have a difficulty understanding the lyrics, or was that easy? Was that
at the time? I was not into the lyrics anyhow. Indeed, I had some difficulty understanding what they were all about.
Yeah.
In the later stages, especially during Misplaced Childhood and Clutching at Straws, they became a bit more understandable, a bit more open. I still find it difficult to understand what script is all about.
So do we. We reputedly speak the same language, but yes.
Yeah,
I mean, Fish has always been very wordy.
Yeah, it wasn't about the lyrics, but it was mainly about the music, about the presentation, the entertainment value, but also about the speeches Fish made in between songs, the political statements, the funny anecdotes, the laughs we had together. So it was the combination package of it all.
Yeah. And when was the first time that you met the band? Was that for the first interviews that are in the book?
Correct. That was in 1987.
Right. And this was at Lorelei.
Yeah.
A very memorable gig, I think, wasn't it?
Lucky to be there. And I never imagined that there was already a lot of tension in the band happening at the time. I wasn't aware of that at all. Only had to find out that later on.
Yeah.
So who was your first interview before you actually interviewed Marillion? When you started your career originally, who was the first kind of band that you got to interview, and how daunting was it?
It was with a colleague of mine. I was doing an internship at the magazine at the time because I was still studying journalism. So the colleague took me along to an interview with Dee Snider from Twisted Sister. I will never forget. He was a real character. He still is.
Yeah, larger than life.
Absolutely.
So when you got to interview Marillion, had it been something that you'd been like looking forward to after the bands that you'd already interviewed?
Yeah, especially talking to Fish, of course, who I spoke the same year at the BBC studios, shortly after the Lorelei gig, because he was, of course, the front man, the main character, the guy with the funny stories. So that was something I was really looking forward to. But in that second interview, the first one with Fish, it became a bit more clear that there was a bit more happening within the band than I was aware of during the Lorelei gig. Fish never disappointed me in any interview. He's always up to good stories and good anecdotes. He's quite different from the Marillion guys in the way he shares information and talks with journalists. I mean, I think that must be quite of the difference between the Scottish character and then the British character. I'm not sure about that, but he was or is way more opener about his personal life, about his relationships. While the Marillion guys never talk about their private lives at all. You can ask about them, but they're really they talk about it to a certain extent. So that was a completely different experience over the years, talking to Fish and talking on a personal level, the things that happened during his relationships. I saw Tara being born, and we talked a lot about her growing up. And I never talked about the children of the Marillion guys. So that was just quite a difference in that.
I think that's, as I say, I've been a long-term fan. Craig's been a fan for a lot of years as well. There's information in this book that is news to me. And okay. I think the way you have at times a very direct questioning angle.
Yeah, we're Dutch are known for that. There's a good thing about it and a bad thing about it. The good thing is that once you get to know us, Dutch journalists, and know that we're pretty direct, the good thing is that we say what we mean.
Yeah.
So if we don't like an album, we say we don't like the album.
That is definitely a theme in the book. Tell the band and Fish when you don't like something.
There's one quote that you did where was it on Holidays in Eden where you'd say one of the songs was the worst Marillion song that you'd ever heard.
No one can.
Yeah. And the funny thing is I was actually reading that on the train and I just felt myself burst out laughing. I think people around us, okay, what's he reading? But I just love the directness that you've got with them. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it can be a source of frustration when you first speak to people from, say, Britain or from the US. People are not used to that directness, that openness. It can be conceived as being blunt or impolite for many people. But the good thing about Marillion and Fish is that they really got used to the Dutch journalists on a pretty early stage, so they know how to deal with us. And I think that they also enjoy talking to us Dutch people because we are so direct. So we say when we don't like albums, but when we say we do like albums or songs, then it's a sincere and meaningful as well.
Yeah.
So it's and of course we're way different than the British tabloid press or the so-called trendy magazines like NME or Melody Maker were in the early days.
Do you think I sense that there's a close relationship between you and Fish, almost a friendship, would you say?
You can call it a friendship because we shared a lot of intimate details about our lives. And he trusted me with a lot of things, things that aren't in the book. He invited me over to his house in the early 90s. So I've been over to Haddington while he was recording one of his albums. So that feels like something like a friendship, but I always tried to keep a certain distance.
Yeah.
Because I think that as an independent journalist, you can't get too close on a friendship, because then you can't ask the questions you want anymore. You can't be the critical journalist, the open and direct Dutch journalist anymore. So I think I have a closer relationship or a better friendship with Fish than the Marillion guys. But I respect the Marillion guys as much as I respect Fish.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the feel I got from some of the interviews with Fish. They're more like just a conversation in that, he's giving up personal information. I don't want to steal any of his stories because there's some great stories in the book. I don't want to talk about them on the pod because I want people to buy the book. But he talks about amounts of money that were paid to buy him out of contracts. He talks in depth about the breakup with Heather around 13 Star in more detail than is in his book in the reissue, I would say.
Really? Yeah, and I left a lot of stuff out on purpose because that was all off the record. And that's a funny story as well. I interviewed him at the venue of one of the fan club gigs in the early 90s in Utrecht. And then after the interview, he did his sound check and he stayed in the venue until the doors went open and the audience got in. So there was some time to kill. So I sat on the balcony and suddenly a Fish joined me and sat next to me. And we talked about all sorts of different stuff. And not about music, but about everyday kind of stuff. And we continued talking about for at least an hour or maybe even 90 minutes. But the fan club got really angry because they had their own program with Fish as well. And they were looking at their watches. They were looking at me. And Fish just sat next to me and didn't want to do anything else than just to talk to me and wait for the concert to start. So these are the moments I really cherish.
Yeah, yeah. But having said that, it's almost as though the Marillion guys, I don't think they are media trained, but they're much more guarded about, as you say, personal aspects of their life. But there are hints about things like the fallout during Sounds That Can't Be Made is alluded to. Mm-hmm. As you say, in the first interview from Lorelei, I think Mark talks about the way that the English media fixate on Fish, and it's not like that in Europe. So there are sort of underlying threads that sort of link back to facts that we know about. You can see the beginning of these things.
Yeah, and I think the main focus with the Marillion interviews is on the music and the development of the music, the recording, the behind the scenes, and how they were able to set up their business unit by setting up the recording studios in Aylesbury, by doing the Kickstarter and crowdfunding stuff. So that the focus is much more on the serious things with the Marillion Marillion guys.
Yeah, you used Kickstarter to kickstart the book, didn't you?
Yeah, correct. Because I learned some lessons with the Pink Floyd book, which I all funded upfront myself. I knew what costs I would make working on this book. So I chose to do the Kickstarter campaign just to fund things like my English editor, Andy Hodge. He's from the UK, and he did some really, really valuable work to the book because, of course, I'm not a native speaking English guy, so writing is something different, but I'm still not able to write 100% perfectly English. So I needed the English speaking, the native speaking editor to do a lot of job, but that costs some money, of course. But also I have to fund the first batch of printing. I had to buy the ISBN numbers, and there were a lot of costs, small costs up front. And the Kickstarters helped to fund that, and that gave me a Kickstarter.
Have you published the book yourself initially?
Yeah, because it's all self-published. I don't have a publisher backing me. I'm all doing it myself.
Okay.
And it's done by printing on demand as well. So every book that has been ordered, it gets printed by Amazon on the fly as we speak.
Wow.
So have you got any more lined up after this then? Because with the success of this so far, and I think you'll find on the run up to Christmas, all the Marillion groups and everything are pushing it. So
yeah, but I'm not doing it for the money.
I know, but I think it's something that you should really be proud of.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the next project will be just a fictional story and see how that goes. I've got plenty of ideas of writing a thriller kind of book, or there are too many ideas. I'm not sure if I'm going to do a biography again. I've got still plenty of other interviews which I can transform into a book, but I'm not sure if that's the thing I want to be working on for the next couple of years. I would like to have a challenge, and the challenge would be a fictional book like the new Da Vinci Code.
Well, set your heights high, yeah.
Yeah.
Have you got? Are these all of your Marillion Fish interviews for that time period, or were there any that you've left out?
No, these are all the interviews I've done. I had a lot of interviews on cassette tape, so I had to transfer them from tape to digital. That was quite a lot of work. I also found out that I had 3 interviews that I lost the recordings from, so I had to use the original articles in the magazines. So I saved just on print. And then I decided to do 2 more extra interviews because I hadn't spoken to Fish for quite some while, so I interviewed him in last year. And I realized that I never talked to Ian before, so I arranged an interview with Ian with Lucy, and that happened to be my last interview in the book.
I like the way in the book where each chapter is preceded by like a fact file. So you've got all the relevant information or parts leading up to what was happening in that particular year or that particular tour and things and stuff like that, which for even the hardcore fans and stuff like that, there's something for everybody in those pieces as well as the interviews themselves.
Yeah, I based that on like many different sources, from the Wikipedia sources to the deluxe versions, the booklets, the other books that are around. And I find it important to make this book not only interesting for the diehard fans, but also for people who never heard of Marillion before. So by giving those facts, I give a more solid base to people who are not that really acquainted with music.
If I had to ask you to pick one of the interviews or one story from one of the interviews as a taster, Edwin, could you do that?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I think there is one I really enjoyed doing because it was different. And we call it a listening test in Dutch. I don't know if that's the correct English word, but what I did was that I played them a couple of progressive rock songs from other artists,
Oh yeah.
And they had to guess what bands or what artists there were, and that was pretty funny to do. And it sort of ended in a conversation about how Marillion wants to get away from the prog label, and that they were pretty fed up with being called a prog band. So it started off as something just for fun and something different, but it ended on a serious note about how they want to steer away from the prog label, and that's something they managed really well.
Yeah, I believe that interview was with Pete and Steve Hogarth, wasn't it?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, because you snuck in a Fish track as well.
Yeah.
But they saw that coming.
They did, yes. They saw right through you, yeah, but it was a good move.
Yeah.
Did you learn anything about obviously we've alluded to some of the tension in the band with the first interviews. Did you learn anything about the dynamics of the band post-Fish?
To a certain extent, you just mentioned what happened in Portugal with the recordings of sounds that can be made. That was quite an eye-opener, because that was the closest the band got to breaking up, if I'm correct. But even then, Mark wasn't showing, how you say that in English, I don't know what the right word is. That
he wasn't giving anything away.
Yeah, that's what I mean. And but I was quite surprised that it was such a stressful time. So that's something I learned from the dynamics within the band. What I still find rather confusing as a listener and as a fan is that they place so much trust in the writing and recording process on jamming together. And they compile all these ideas and give them to the producer in charge, and then he leaves them up with, say, 20 good ideas, and then they start writing further, and they start working on songs. And I always thought, what would happen if you do it the old-fashioned way and put them in a studio for, say, a couple of weeks, and just ask them to write the songs and record an album on the spot, instead of doing it by jamming, just writing songs in a studio together as a band, and writing on songs from scratch, and not leaving the studio before those songs are finished.
I think the closest time they've done that was probably Afraid of Sunlight.
AOS, yeah.
When they only had, what was it, less than like 6 to 9 months to actually get the album out, and then bang, it's by far one of their best albums they've ever made.
Yeah,
and it's got songs on it.
Yeah, I'm still raising the question because, contrary to most people and most fans, I'm not that keen on the last album. I think the songs are too complicated, too long, too constructed. Like each song might as well be 5 different songs, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And I'm a sucker for songs like Cannibal Surf Babe or Don't Hurt Yourself, and stuff like that. I also like the epic songs like Neverland and Invisible Man. But to be honest, I like Marillion doing those compact songs better than doing stuff like the last album. But that's everybody's personal taste.
Yeah. What would be your favourite album from each era? I'll allow you a Fish and a Hogarth one.
I think it will be Clutching from the Fish area. Because it's the personal view, the story, the lyrics you can relate to, and the tension you feel within the music. From the Hogarth area, it's hard to choose one. I think I like Brave, Marbles, and Sounds That Can't Be Made. I think if you put a gun to my head, it will be Marbles.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Fish solo?
I think the first two. I think I like the second one better. But I must say I'm also really, really impressed by stuff like the Highwood Suite. But then again, I also like his compact songs like Lucky, The Company, and stuff like that.
Yeah. What's your view on Weltschmerz?
There's a lot of tension. Little Man with a Stick, is that on?
Man with a Stick, yeah.
That's one song I particularly like, and it's a good farewell album. It's like the album is meant to be, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, we reviewed it 2 or 3 weeks ago. It's a great album, but it's very heavy subject matter, isn't it, throughout?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And a little bit too long.
Completely different stuff from the early Lucky and the company kind of stuff. Yeah. And that's good. I mean, he's changing as well, and I'm really, really anxious to know where he's at, say, 5 years' time, when he's living in his croft and writing his book and missing performing for sure. Yeah.
But when it does come, the book will be fantastic. It'll be earth-shattering. It's got to be. The potential for that book is immense.
The lawyers will be out.
Like a running gag in my book. I mean, he's been talking about that book in different shapes and sizes and forms for ages now. Yes. So, I hope he finds the time to work on that and to finish it in the next couple of years.
Am I right in thinking that you sent everything to Fish and the band to have a look at before you published, and Fish reviewed it and the band didn't have time? Is that right?
Yeah, Fish had a look at it. And he added some stuff, and he decided what parts of the off the record stuff is still off the record and what isn't. We cut down on a few swearing words every now and then. But in general, he was very mild, and I think 99% of what I sent over to him made the book. So there was no censorship. It was to make a few clarifications in certain events. I sent the book to Marillion as well, but they were on holiday at the time. It was just before the weekends, and Lucy said that they had completely full trust in me, and that they were 100% sure that it would be a good breed. So they left it all up to me.
Yeah, I mean, as I've said, the Fish ones are as honest as anything you'll read by featuring the guy. They don't read as though they're filtered or in any sort of way. And I think that's the thing I'd really like to get across to people who maybe are in two minds about the book. You will learn facts and figures about the band that you didn't know before.
Good.
And there'll be loads of stuff where you just be laughing out loud at it, because there's some really good stories in there.
What were your best takeaways from the book? You being the Marillion experts, what sort of stuff did you learn?
I wouldn't use the word expert, Edwin, but thank you for that.
It was the Vigil stuff and the Season's End interviews. The Vigil stuff was really interesting, because that was my joining of the fandom. You know, I got into Marillion and Fish at the split point, and so the interviews there. And everything that Fish was going through, where he was having to delay the album and let the Marillos go first, and then his fight over his percentages and things with EMI and all those early years, things like that. It was absolutely just fascinating for me.
Yeah, one thing I would like to stress said something about the Marillion guys being a bit more serious, but I would like to stress that I had a lot of good laughs with them as well. Take the last interview with Ian, for instance, and the stories he told me about his early days with a band called Trace in the Netherlands, and with the pet goat at the backseat of a car. I mean, those are just brilliant stories, and I'm glad and proud that he gave me those insights in those early days. So that was something I really, really enjoyed. And that happened during all of the years. We had some serious and really direct conversations, and we didn't always agree on stuff. But then again, we had a lot of good laughs together.
Yeah, and that comes across in the interviews, I have to say. I think my favourite takes from the book are probably around the same sort of era as Craig, but I'm really fascinated by the business side of things, where releasing Polydor buying Fish out of the EMI contract, and he talks about the numbers and the amount of money that he owed at the time. It's such an eye-opener for me as a fan. I can't imagine owing that sort of money and having that sort of pressure and that influencing your decisions. He's very honest about it in the book.
Yeah. Yeah, when you look at all the Fish interviews, you see how much he has struggled to find a financially healthy business setup over the years.
Yeah,
and to make ends meet. He had a lot of setbacks with record company deals, legal stuff, health issues, relationships. But I have such a huge respect for how he kept fighting, and he never gave up.
No.
And how he managed to fight for what he believes in. He's a bit stubborn at times, but that same stubbornness helped him to carry on and to deliver those great albums and to remain his sense of humor as well. So I have such a huge respect for that. And the same goes for Marillion. I mean, they worked hard to get a financially good business running. And they put a lot of effort in that. I also have huge respect for the creative ways in how Lucy and her team works on creative marketing kind of schemes to sell albums and to get people aware of albums by putting huge billboards up and stuff on buses and stuff like that. I think that's just amazing that a unit like a band with the people surrounding them can deliver such a great sense of business and workmanship without the backing of a record company, and that's something really special these days.
Absolutely, they're constantly coming up with new ways to sort of get media coverage or to engage the fans in a new way. It's incredible.
The fans are something special too. I mean, look at you guys, look at the other people, look at the fan communities, look at the weekends. That's something that still amazes me as well, that over the years, the people stay very, very loyal to the band, stayed loyal to Fish, stayed loyal to the changes of styles and choruses over the years. Not every album was a great album, but they stayed loyal to the band and through thick and thin, and that's something special as well. At the end of the day, that's why I wrote the book, not to say thank you to the band and Fish, but more or less to say thank you to the fans to make this all possible.
When you've interviewed other bands, have you ever been as close to any other bands than you are to like Marillion and Fish? Have you got any other?
Saga. I met the Saga guys in '81, so a couple of years before I met the Marillion guys. And I think that's the only band I interviewed more often than I did with Marillion. And that's a real a close friendship these days. We mail each other every now and then, not that often. We phone each other up whenever they're over here. I'll go off to the concerts. So that's one band that I'm really proud of, that I can call them friends, and so that's why I refuse to interview them for any magazines these days, because the friendship is too close for that.
You must have been really pleased with the dual headliner tour then.
Yeah, but that was weird because there were a lot of things happening within Saga at the time. With the keyboard playing, losing his eyesight because of an injury, and then they had to fly in some stand-ins from their cover band. So that was pretty funny as well. Looking back on it now, at the time it was not that funny at all.
Oh, no.
But it was a great lineup, of course. I saw Marillion and Saga play not only in the Netherlands but also in Munich, if I'm not mistaken, and it was a great show.
Yeah.
Fun memories. Happy times.
So when I take you're still working as an independent journalist and you're still out there, how do you find it getting interviews with bands now and getting honest interviews with bands which aren't covered by a lot of PR?
It has changed. It was much more different in the early days. In the early days, you could call a record company up and say, I would like to interview this band or this artist, and they would try to manage an interview of you. But these days, you're just happy if you get 30 minutes for a popular artist, and these are all done by either phone or online sessions. It seldomly happens that you get invited for an interview session one-on-one in a hotel room, or there were a lot of press trips to London, to even the US in the early days, and that almost never happens again these days. So the business has changed a lot. I have a funny story. Are you into stories? Do we have time for a funny story?
Yeah, absolutely.
As much as you want.
Yeah. Well, it's not Marillion related, but it's Van Halen related. If you ask me what the most memorable interview was I've ever done, it's the Van Halen one. The guitar player Eddie Van Halen is Dutch from origin, right? He's born in the Netherlands and moved to the US on a very early age, but he still spoke a few Dutch words when I met him. So I was flown over to the US during the release of Van Halen 3, and that was the album with Gary Cherone as a singer from Extreme. Remember that? Yeah. So what happened, speaking of the early days, I was invited to fly over to Los Angeles, and the schedule was like I was arriving after a long continental flight. I was driven to the record company on the same day to listen to a demo of the album at the record company's office. And then a taxi brought me to Eddie Van Halen's studio, where I met the two guys, Gary and Eddie, for an interview. Then I was put in a hotel, flown back to the Netherlands the next day. So what happened was that I arrived at the record company, listened to the album, which I didn't like at all, being a big Van Halen fan and a big fan of their previous singers, and David Lee Roth is an all-time hero, and Sammy Hagar is a good singer as well. But I thought that the match between Van Halen and Gary Cherone didn't really work out. So I was not looking forward to this interview with not liking the album. So I arrived with a huge jet lag and an album I didn't like at his studio, and I started talking, and I thought, well, I can be the direct journalist like we just talked about, and starting all these questions about the album. And well, there was a certain tension on the interview, and it became worse and worse and worse. And after half an hour, I thought, oh, this is going the wrong way. And then suddenly things changed. I said, oh, sorry, guys, maybe I'm not asking the right questions. I'm tired. I just flew in from the Netherlands. I have a jet lag. And so forgive me if I'm not in the best mood and not asking the right questions. And then Eddie said, yeah, well, no, we had a long day. We had a lot of interviews. And okay, you're the last one in line. And okay, no problem. We start all over again. So at that very moment, I said literally, okay, now we're here and we're good friends again. I can't remember the name of the song, but this and that song I consider the worst Van Halen song ever. And what happened next, I will never forget. Eddie stood up, walked outside, left the door of the studio open, and started talking to the people from the record company that were waiting outside and gesturing with his arms. And I thought, oh, now I've done it. Now I can forget about the rest of my career. And then he came back and he walked over to me and shook my hand. And I was completely dumbfounded. I thought, well, what's happening now? Why are you shaking my hand after I just said that one of the new songs is the worst Van Halen song ever? And he said, thank you. And I looked, thank you. Why are you thanking me? Well, we didn't like the song either, but we put it on the record because the record company wanted us to do so. And they liked the song, but we didn't like it either. But what I did now was said to the record company that we are going to put it off the record and it won't be released on the new album. So I was instrumental of getting a song from the Van Halen album, but I didn't get any credits. Unfortunately.
You've saved the world from hearing that track, Edwin. Yeah.
How's that for a rock and roll story?
Fantastic.
That's
great
great.
story.
You know, you said you've interviewed Pink Floyd and Roger Waters over the years.
Yeah.
How did you find the dynamic, obviously separately, interviewing Gilmour and interviewing Waters?
Interviewing Waters is everything you think it would be, from very political, straightforward. He's still the angry old man he's now. So when you interview Waters and Dave Gilmour, where all the clashes came from, and why they didn't get along at the end. They're completely different characters, completely opposite characters. And Dave Gilmour is just a sweet, soft. What's the English word for that? He's a laid back kind of person, while Roger Waters is completely the opposite. But my most difficult and my most tough interviews were with David Gilmour, because when you talk to him through telephone, you have to prepare really, really well, because then he has not much interesting to say. So you have to work really, really hard as a journalist to get enough out of him that could end up in an interview and make it worthwhile. But then again, when you speak to him in person, and I was invited over to a studio boat, which is on the Thames side. I'm not sure if it's still operational, but he recorded a few albums there. It was completely the opposite. It was like sitting together in the pub, having a pint and having a good talk together. So I enjoyed that way more than all the interviews I did through telephone talking to David Gilmour. I only talked to Roger Waters once, so that's a different experience than the 3 or 4 times I talked to Gilmour. But why there are such different characters and why things went wrong at the end.
Yeah, so it'd be nothing like interviewing Gilmour compared to interviewing Fish, where Fish you could probably not get him to shut up.
No, but if you have to compare Pink Floyd and the members in Pink Floyd to say people like Fish, then Nick Mason has some sort of the same sense of humor, and he's the funny guy and he makes all the jokes. So you can compare the attitude of sometimes not taking things too seriously a bit to how Nick Mason looks to the music industry. And
Nick's the kind of central point, though, isn't he? He's still managed to remain friends with Roger Waters as well as being friends with Dave Gilmour. So
he's the peacemaker.
Yeah.
And Rick Wright was just a sweet, sensitive, very quiet guy, but a very nice person to talk to.
Wow. Okay. Well, look, we've covered lots there, Edwin. Thank you very much for chatting to us today.
Did it make any sense, my terrible Dutch accent? And
more sense than our accents, Edwin, definitely. But what we want to do before we wrap this up is to direct anybody that's interested in your book, The Marillion and Fish Files, to Amazon. It's available in hardback and paperback. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
And is there a direct place they can buy it from, which is better for you at all, or is Amazon the way to go?
For Dutch people, they can buy it at bol.com, which is a similar site, but based on just the Dutch market. And if people find it difficult to get it from either of those sites, they can drop me an email. Just go to my website, contact me, and I'll be more than happy to arrange something to send it directly.
We'll put the links on.
Absolutely.
On the pod for you.
It's a great thing to ask Santa for if you're a Marillion fan. If your wife's asking you what you want for Christmas, there's the answer.
You don't ask, you demand.
Well,
I want this book.
Yes, it's
thank you.
really.
It was a real pleasure talking to you,
Edwin. Thank you very much. It's a great read. I can't recommend it highly enough. And thanks very much for your time today. It's been lovely chatting to you.
Absolutely fantastic. I bet you've got stories about every band going.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thanks a lot, Edwin. Fantastic.
Merry Christmas.
Well, nice guy.
A lovely guy.
Yeah.
How can we always get really, really, really lovely guests?
Well, it's good, isn't it? It's good. I mean, as we said, the book's a great read, and there's some real stories. There's things I would have liked to have talked about in the podcast, but I don't want to spoil it from the book. We're not on commission, but we do recommend the book very highly.
Definitely, it's a corker, and I think I'll read it again.
Yeah, absolutely. But we want to thank Edwin for his time today, and as usual, thank you very much for listening. It's good night from me.
And it's good night from him. Take care.
And stay alive!
You forgot to say something.
Greg Houston!
Hey! Thanks for listening to Planet Marzipan Podcast. Please like and subscribe from whichever platform you get your podcasts from. You can contact us at planetmarzipanpodcast@gmail.com and check out marillion.com, fishmusic.scot or fishmusic.eu for all the good stuff.